It all started with a simple misunderstanding, or at least that's what I thought. I had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, looking for some peace after years of service. My police-issued motorcycle, something I took pride in, was parked in my driveway, shining under the afternoon sun. I never expected it to cause any trouble. But then came the notices, passive-aggressive letters from the HOA demanding I remove it or join their association. I figured I'd talk it out, clear things up. Instead, I came home one evening to a pile of ashes. My police bike had been torched. At first, I was in shock. Who would do something like this? And why? I asked around, but neighbors stayed tight-lipped, some even looked away. It was clear someone wanted to make a point. What they didn't know, though, was who I really was. I wasn't just some new guy on the block with a badge. I was the county sheriff, and I wasn't about to let this go. That's when the real story began. What started as a neighborhood squabble turned into something much bigger. The moment the HOA learned who I was, their whole attitude changed. But by then, it was too late. They'd crossed a line they couldn't erase. You're not going to believe what happened next. And trust me, this wasn't just about a bike anymore. This was about power, respect, and what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. A few days after the fire, I started piecing things together. The HOA president, a guy named Mark, had a reputation for running the neighborhood like his own little kingdom. Everyone seemed scared of him, or at least very careful not to cross him. I found out my bike had been brought up at a recent HOA meeting. They claimed it was an eyesore and against some unspoken aesthetic standards. Funny thing was, I'd read the bylaws they slipped under my door. Nowhere did it say anything about motorcycles, especially not government-issued ones. I wasn't looking to start problems. I just wanted to live quietly. But something about the way everyone tiptoed around Mark felt off. One neighbor whispered that the HOA had a history of pushing people out, harassing them with fines, fake violations, even anonymous complaints. Still, burning my bike, that was on a whole other level. I filed a report, but kept it internal. I wanted to see who'd slip up. Cameras were suddenly installed at the neighborhood entrance a day after the fire. Curious timing. Then a new HOA bulletin came out, saying vehicles with law enforcement markings were no longer welcome. No vote, no explanation. That's when I started digging into the HOA records. Financial reports, complaints, anything I could find. And let's just say, there were things that didn't add up. I hadn't even been there a month, and I could already feel the pressure mounting. But they still didn't know they were dealing with a county sheriff. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. The HOA wasn't just strict, they were operating like a shadow council. I found records of fines being issued without proof, and homeowners being pressured into paying for repairs that were never completed. One elderly couple down the street had been fined 3 times in 1 month for having a flower pot too close to the walkway. They didn't fight it, just paid up and kept their heads down. When I asked them about it, they shut their blinds. Fear was thick in this place. Meanwhile, my own situation escalated. I received a certified letter claiming I owed over $1,000 in violation fees, one for unauthorized emergency vehicle presence, another for public safety disturbance. That last one made me laugh, but only for a second. It meant someone was intentionally twisting the rules to come after me. Someone who knew what they were doing. At night, I noticed a white SUV parked just down the street, engine off, windows tinted. Always in the same spot, always gone by morning. I started checking license plates and running names. A pattern formed. Most of the HOA board lived within a few blocks of each other. One of them, it turned out, had a brother who'd been involved in a land deal flagged for fraud last year. That same name showed up in the HOA's landscaping contracts. There were layers to this, and the more I pulled, the more it unraveled. But still, no one knew I was building a case behind the scenes. Not yet. I knew I was getting close when the tone of the neighborhood started to shift. Some people avoided eye contact completely. Others gave subtle nods or whispered, "Be careful." The white SUV started showing up more frequently, sometimes idling for hours at night. I had already documented its license plate and traced it back to a private security firm, one that had oddly close ties with Mark, the HOA president. Then came the warning. A plain envelope on my porch, no stamp, no name, just a single sheet of paper that read, "Asterisk, stop digging, asterisk," that was it. No threats, no explanation, but it said everything. They knew I was on to them, and they were getting nervous. I didn't stop. I kept collecting evidence, recording every conversation, every suspicious transaction I could trace. I talked to a former board member who had quietly moved out last year. She told me she left after refusing to sign off on a contract that would have funneled HOA funds into a community development project that never existed. She tried to speak up and got slapped with violations until she finally sold her home. The tension in the air was thick now. HOA meetings were being held behind closed doors. Notices about new emergency security measures were slipped into every mailbox. My mailbox, though, was smashed in one morning. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Everything was building up. The fake violations, the hidden deals, the intimidation, it all pointed to something bigger. And the moment was coming where they'd finally find out the truth about who I was. Just when I thought I had the full picture, something unexpected happened that shifted everything. One evening, I got a call from the county dispatch. Not unusual until I heard the name. One of our detectives had received an anonymous tip about a fire-related insurance claim filed just 2 days after my police bike was destroyed. The name on the claim, Mark's cousin. The address listed was an empty property 2 blocks from my house, registered under a shell company tied to several HOA board members. Now it wasn't just about HOA violations or power plays. This was fraud, real, traceable, and punishable. And it looked like my burned bike might have been more than just retaliation. It could have been part of a staged series of property losses used to funnel money through insurance payouts. If true, that meant my situation wasn't personal. It was part of a pattern. I cross-checked fire reports from the past 2 years. A disturbing trend emerged: small, isolated accidents in the neighborhood, each followed by suspiciously timed renovations or payouts, and each linked, one way or another, back to someone on the HOA board. But just as I prepared to bring in a full investigation team, things took a darker turn. My home security system was disabled one night. Nothing was taken, but someone had clearly been inside. A picture of my burned bike had been left on my kitchen counter, printed in black and white. No words this time, just a message that said everything. They knew I was closing in, and they were done playing games. I'd had enough. That picture on my kitchen counter was the final push. The next morning, I went into full sheriff mode. No more waiting, no more watching. I called in a small task force I trusted and briefed them on everything. The fake violations, the shady contracts, the insurance fraud, and now what looked like harassment meant to silence me. We coordinated with the county prosecutor, and within 48 hours, we had warrants in hand. We hit 3 houses simultaneously: Mark's, his cousin's, and the shell property listed on the insurance claim. What we found was worse than expected. Hidden in Mark's garage was a stash of HOA documents, old hard drives, and prepaid cards used to pay contractors who didn't exist. At the cousin's place, investigators found insurance paperwork tied to at least 5 other claims, all in the same neighborhood. One file even included photos of my bike, taken before it burned. That was the nail in the coffin. Word spread fast. Neighbors started coming forward, finally willing to talk. Turns out a lot of people had been bullied into silence. Some even tried to leave but couldn't sell their homes because of bogus liens the HOA had placed. Mark and 2 other board members were arrested that same week. But just when I thought the whole thing was wrapped up, one last twist hit me. The HOA's original incorporation paperwork had been altered years ago. The real president, on paper, was someone else entirely. A name I hadn't seen yet. And that person, still living in the neighborhood, still hiding in plain sight. It didn't take long to track down the name listed on the old HOA documents. A woman named Eleanor, quiet, reclusive, living at the far end of the neighborhood. She hadn't been to a meeting in years, yet legally she was still the HOA president. I paid her a visit. At first, she seemed confused, but when I showed her the altered records, her expression changed. She told me she had stepped down years ago, but Mark and the others never filed the proper paperwork. Instead, they ran things behind the scenes, using her name to cover their tracks. She had no idea what had been going on. With her help, we got the HOA legally dissolved and a temporary trustee was appointed to rebuild things the right way. Residents came together like I'd never seen before, holding honest meetings, voting on new rules, and most importantly, talking openly without fear. The couple with the flower pot. They finally got their garden back. And me. I got a new police bike, parked proudly in my driveway, this time with a few cameras pointed right at it. What started as a strange feud over HOA rules turned out to be something way deeper, about power, manipulation, and how easily people can be controlled when no one speaks up. But in the end, the truth came out. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn fear into action. So if you're ever told to stay quiet or back down, don't. You never know who's watching or who you're really dealing with.